Welcome to Your Gal Friday, a podcast about female leaders, innovators, and rule breakers. Each week, your hosts, Kate and Phoebe, will shine a spotlight on an amazing gal and talk about what we can all learn from her. Brought to you by Gal's Guide to the Galaxy. Welcome to Your Gal Friday. I'm Kate Chaplin.
And I'm Phoebe Freer.
Today we're talking about a gal who has sold more than 400 million copies of her books. She got children excited to read massive page turners, won multiple awards including being named the most influential woman in Britain. And unlike the other gals we've talked about in the series so far, she's still alive.
Yay!
So today we are talking about the life and legacy building of JK Rowling.
So if you pay attention to pop culture, you know who JK Rowling is. And there's so much more than just she's the author of Harry Potter. There's more to this story.
So much more, yeah.
Yeah. So even if you don't like young adult books or reading or watching movies, you know her name. And Kate even informed me that the initials JK are even known globally, which is crazy. You just can't escape her name. So yes, I knew who she was well before this podcast, even though I never really got into the books or finished watching the Harry Potter movies. In fact, to be honest, I don't even really like the character Harry Potter very much, because, as you might already know from the minicast. However, the world of Harry Potter and the magic and the lore and all the side characters and all... it's all very fascinating to me, and it makes me wonder about the mind of the person who created this world, because that takes a lot of imagination to just come up with something new. So
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. For me, what I knew going into it, I'd say maybe 10 years ago, could be longer than that, I'm not sure. I read an unauthorized biography by Mark Shapiro about JK. I was heavily into writing at the time, and so I was reading books about authors and about the process of writing, and I was simply just kind of trying to see if I fit into the world of authors. I wrote and I submitted some short stories, and I outlined 4 or 5 books. None of those saw the light of day. That is fine. I was writing. But I wanted to study JK because she was the biggest thing in the world of publishing at that time. All writers want success. I mean, we do. Success and power and creativity, and JK had it. So I read the first 2 books and the biography really as fuel, my writing fuel sort of thing. What I took away from that study, number one, she is an amazing writer. I really do have to hands down give her kudos for that. She writes page turners with just seemingly unsolvable problems in the first chapter, and then answers that by the end of the chapter, and then poses an even more unsolvable problem at the end of the next. They read almost like a detective novel.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The second one that I learned, she got lucky with publishing, and that is not a slam on her talent, because she definitely has it. I've just gotten to know quite a few talented writers in my time, many of whom really deserve the success that JK got. But honestly, it's the right place at the right time, and for some, it's easier, and for some, it's harder. Publishing is really rough waters to wade through, so some get to the shore, and some might get lost in the tide, unfortunately. And number 3, she got kids to read again. Now, I've been to quite a few midnight movie screenings in my time, but if you told me when I was a kid that there would be a midnight book release party, I would have thought you were mad.
Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah, it's amazing to me to see kids and adults excited about reading books. And I really, really adore that. Actually, my oldest daughter, out of the blue, started reading the Harry Potter books in August, and she is now finishing up the last book this week.
That's awesome.
I just love seeing any child excited about reading, and so because of that, JK is totally a gift.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so let's dig into where she grew up and where she was born.
Absolutely. So J.K. Rowling was actually born as Joanne Rowling, and she was born on July 31st in 1965 at the Yates General Hospital just outside of Bristol. So her parents were Peter James Rowling, and he was a Rolls-Royce aircraft engineer. So her mom was Anne Rowling, and she was a science technician in the chemistry department of the Wheaton Comprehensive, where Joanne herself eventually went to school. So her parents first met on a train departing from King's Cross Station, bound for Aberystwyth in 1964, which JK had said in an interview that place was always very magical to her, and it is why it later made it into her writing.
I think that's adorable. My parents met
Right,
at a
isn't that?
drive-in, so I do have a drive-in screenplay just because.
That's amazing. I
Yeah,
love that.
you never know.
Yeah. So we may go back and forth saying JK or Joe or Joanne because, like, I think she prefers Joe, but then she's Joanne, but then everybody knows
Right.
her as JK, so some is just easier than others, but
It sounds like it's going to be a personal preference for everyone, so we'll have a bit of
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So when Joanne grew up, she was surrounded by books, and she even said that she lived for books. She said, quote, "I was your basic common or garden bookworm, complete with the freckles and national health spectacles." Which is so
Adorable.
adorable because she like didn't grow
Yeah.
out of that.
So cute. I love that.
Yeah. So she grew up in Gloucestershire, England, and in Chepstow, Gwent, in southeast Wales. And even as a child, Jo was writing stories and essentially children's books that was written and illustrated by herself, and then she read them to her younger sister. So Jo's family moved to the nearby village in Winterbourne when she was 4, and she attended the St. Michael's Primary School. So the headmaster at St. Michael's, Alfred Dunn, has been suggested that maybe, just maybe, he was the inspiration for the Harry Potter headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. So Jo actually moved around a lot in Europe. That's why she's like well-rounded, I think. It's pretty awesome,
Right.
actually. So when she was 9, they moved to Church Cottage in Gloucestershire, in the village of Tutshill, close to Chepstow, Wales. And then she attended the secondary school at Wheaton School in college, where her mother worked in the science department. Jo later said that she based the character of Hermione Granger on herself when she was around that age, which is pretty adorable.
I can see it. I really like that.
Yeah, totally. And she said in
Mhm.
an interview that she saw a lot of herself in Hermione. It was just
Yeah.
completely, this is me. Like,
Easiest character to write.
totally.
And
Yeah.
such a great character, too. I love it.
Oh my gosh, she's my favorite.
Yep, mine too.
Yeah, totally. So her best friend, Sean Harris, owned a turquoise Ford Angela, which Jo says inspired the flying version that appeared in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So after I watched her biography and actually watched her talk to her friend about that car, it was apparent to me at how important it was to her at the time. And it was just adorable to see like the importance and the sentimental value and the fact that now literally everyone from around the world has that same sentimental value as she does.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
love
just
that.
adorable to see how that's passed on.
It's sharing a wonderful memory that was her memory and now it becomes, the reader's memory as well. I love that.
I love that too. So Jo left home at the age of 18 for Exeter University, where she read so widely outside of her French and classic syllabus that she actually had a fine for the library, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
But this knowledge of the classics will one day come in handy, and because of creating the spells for Harry Potter, because some of them are based on Latin and other languages.
Right.
But also totally made up from her. Because she also said in her biography that everything's loosely based off of real things, but it's all her own lore, it's all her own.
She twisted it to meet her own ends, yes.
She did, and she'll even admit it.
It's what writers do. I love it.
Totally. So after a year of studying in Paris, JK graduated from Exeter in 1986, and then she moved to London to work as a researcher and bilingual secretary for Amnesty International.
Awesome. So in 1990, Jo was on a train from Manchester to London when a book idea came out of nowhere. And she talks about it in a biography special. She talks about this physical rush of excitement. And as a writer, I totally get this. There are some days you struggle with a word or plot mapping, but above all, the ideas. And when you finally get an idea that you have a passion for, you know that excitement. But here's the part of the story that fellow writers, it will fill them with anxiety. When Jo thought of the idea for Harry Potter, she was on a 4-hour train ride with nothing to write with. Right? Anxiety.
That gave me anxiety when I heard that. I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, I'd be finding a rock or something, sketching on the, I don't know.
A sharp implement of anything.
Yeah, it's something like, scratching into the car or something. I don't know.
It's desperation. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
But she sat on that train and she let her imagination fill in the ideas. And she held close to those ideas so she wouldn't lose them. And so she could write them down the second she found a pen. She would then spend the next 5 years working on the book. However, life would try to get in the way.
Sorry, it makes me wonder, like, if sitting there and pondering it helped her writing process.
I think it did.
Because we so often, like, want to write it down so quickly, but then you're focusing on writing, but you're also focusing on your ideas coming. So I wonder if that, I don't know, I almost want to try it next time I have an idea.
Me too, actually.
Just sit and ponder it, yeah.
Yep, just to take the time to think out the idea and to even visually work on it instead of the getting the words right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes the actual work of the words get in the way of the creativity and the imagination.
Totally.
I think it was really a gift.
Yeah.
As torturous as it sounds, to have 4 hours to just think of a fabulous idea and not be able to get it down and worry you'll forget.
Right.
So the winter of that same year, Jo's mother died at the age of 45. Now, Anne lost a 10-year struggle with multiple sclerosis, and it's not easy losing a parent that young, and Jo said that she channeled it into her books. A major theme in all the Harry Potter books is death. But after seeing an advert for the need for a teacher for English as a foreign language, Jo took a job and moved to Porto in Portugal. She wrote during the day and she taught at night. And in Portugal, she met a television journalist, Jorge Arantes, and they married in 1992 and had a daughter. Their marriage was to be short-lived, however. And in 1993, Jo and her daughter and the first 3 chapters of what would be Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone arrived in Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, it was in Edinburgh where most of the book of Harry Potter really took shape. It's where the book became a real book. It's also where the most amount of rumors and urban legends spawn around Jo's personal life. I was at a dinner party this week and I was asked who the next gal we were going to cover for the show was, and I said that it was going to be JK Rowling. Well, most of the common knowledge at that dinner party was that she was a penniless single mother on welfare and couldn't afford paper or heat for her apartment. So let's actually debunk that right now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because Jo herself has said that the 6 months in Edinburgh were, quote, a pretty unhappy 6 months. She was 28. She was living on government benefit of £7 a week. There was little work, but what was even more frustrating and complicated was affording childcare. I mean, even working part-time to be able to afford it. But still, she persisted. She did a lot of writing in that time, and she has debunked the rumors that she couldn't even afford paper and would write on napkins. Now, writers will write on anything when they have a flash of ideas, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
It just so happens. So if it's something that you can write on and it's the quickest thing you see, you write on it. It doesn't mean that you are too poor to afford paper.
Right. No.
Yep. There was also stories that Jo would write in cafes because her flat in Edinburgh didn't have heat. And she really doesn't like this assumption she was so naive. She did
not like that at all.
She was so mad about that. And I actually understand because it's a comment on her intelligence. Because it's very cold there. Yeah, she had an
Yeah.
infant, and it gets really cold in Edinburgh, Scotland. So, right?
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous, and I understand why she was mad, but man, that. Oh,
Yep.
she's like, let me just get this straight right now. I'm like, all right, let's pass on the information for you, like, please.
Exactly. I totally believe you. Yes.
Yeah.
But how that kind of got entwined with the cafes, she would actually write in cafes.
Right.
But with many infants, her daughter would only fall asleep and take her naps if she was in motion. So she would load up the stroller and she would walk around town. And the instant her daughter fell asleep, Joe would rush into the nearest cafe and write. And I deeply relate to this because I would use car rides or a walk around the mall to help my daughters with their napping situations. And I would also be ready with a pen and paper to use that time to either get words out or get ideas fleshed out. Now, when my girls got older, we went to trips to the playground so that they could play. And I wrote while I watched them. So basically,
That's
as a
how you do
writer
it.
and a parent, you find any scrap of paper and you find any time you can to get those words out.
Makes sense.
Yep. So, since that idea on a train, Joe plotted out 7 books, one for each school year. She even knew what the last chapter would be. With book 1 finished in 1995, we now enter the road to publication. And Phoebe, you researched this part for us.
One thing I think if I understood this correctly in the biography, was she wrote the last chapter of the last book ahead of time,
Yeah.
so there was something to work towards.
Right. So she could kind of see the bookend and she could kind of see the
Right.
journey that it had to get there. Also, I could be interpreting it, but it sounded like it was going to be a really hard chapter. So she
Yeah.
kind of needed to get it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she had to hide it from everybody.
Everybody. Yes, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So JK finished her first book. After notes and notes and years of research and love and devotion, her book was finally done.
Yay.
And it was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Mm-hmm.
So she completed the full manuscript and she sent the first 3 chapters to a number of literary agents, one of whom wrote back and asked to see the rest of the book. She says it was, quote, the best letter I have ever received in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they submitted the book to 12 different publishing houses, all of which turned it down. A year later, she was finally given the green light by a publishing house called Bloomsbury in London. And although they agreed to publish the book, JK says that she was advised to get a day job since she had little chance of making any money in a children's book, in their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Which now is kind of
It's ironic
comical.
now.
Yeah.
But
It
it's
is.
still very good advice.
No, it is. I am not disagreeing. It was just like, this is really amusing because she was like the richest person ever now. Or
Of
you know.
course. She's a very
Oh.
successful author. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, the book was first published by Bloomsbury Children's Books in June of 1997 under the name JK Rowling. But as we told you earlier, JK Rowling is not her given name. JK's given name is Joanne Rowling. So the K actually stands for Kathleen. It's not her, well, is it her middle name?
No, she doesn't have a middle name.
Okay.
This was something I found interesting. Her birth certificate, she does not have a middle name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
See, that's okay, good. Because I
Yeah.
thought that was my understanding too, but I was like, wait, maybe I don't know. But
Yep.
on everything, it's like she's just Joanne Rowling, so she doesn't even have a middle name.
Right.
So K stands for her grandmother's name.
Yeah.
And it was added because of her publisher's request, who thought that a book that was obviously a female author might not appeal to the target audience of young boys. Which kind of boggles my mind, but unfortunately, when you think about it, it makes a little sense.
Mhm.
Because, like, when I hear the name or see the name J.K. Rowling, I also think of J.R.R. Tolkien, who is famously well-known male writer, and it has a, quote, better ring to it or whatever than Joanne Rowling. It makes me wonder, though, how she reacted to the name change. Because, like, was she offended? Did she care? Like, was she grateful that the publishing house was looking out for her, trying to make sales, or was it a struggle to come to grips with it? I mean, I'm really torn because it's just, I don't
It's a
know
lot
if
of what
somebody
ifs.
told.
Yeah.
It is. It's like I like my name. So I don't know. What do you think, Kate?
Well, when it comes down to writers using either initials or pen names, it's actually extremely common. It's not straightforward why, though.
Gotcha.
It really is a case by case basis of why they do it. Sometimes it's the writer themselves chooses
Yeah.
initials, and then sometimes it is the publisher. Also, sometimes it's a trend, actually. If there's a lot of authors
Yeah.
with initials, it's a trend.
That makes sense. Like even my mom's published books and she's E.M. Freer.
Hmm.
Like she didn't use her full first name too. So I don't
Right.
know, maybe I should ask my mom about this cuz
This is
that's like
true.
she did that to herself, but M is
Right.
her actual
Was
for her
she
actual middle name.
inspired by somebody of a was she inspired by an author that she loves that did initials?
Right.
Or was it just she liked the ring of it? Or was it her publisher going, well, let's try this?
Right. I should ask her now.
Yes, absolutely. I think so. I mean, the other reasons is that it's popular in children's books, especially. I mean, think about
Oh,
it.
gotcha.
R.L. Stein, that's the Goosebumps author.
Right.
E.B. White wrote Charlotte's
Oh,
Web,
okay.
and C.S.
Right.
Lewis of Chronicles of Narnia, and even J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan. So
Wow.
initials are pretty common throughout history. Now, all those examples are male,
Right.
so it's one of those sort of things. But also at the same time around Harry Potter, there was also K.A. Applegate. She actually did the Animorphs series, and she had
Oh,
initials
okay.
too. So it could
Yeah.
have been a trend. It could have been the children's industry sort of thing. um,
Gotcha.
but
Okay.
there is also really a terrible bias in the world of publishing when it comes to kids' books, that girls will read books and it doesn't matter who the main character is, whether they're male or female. But it is still said that boys tend to only read books that are about boys written by boys. Now,
Wow.
what is wonderful to me, though, is even when boys found out that Harry Potter was written by a woman, and today everybody knows it, they're still
Right.
reading it. So to me, she kind of bucked that theory,
Totally.
which I love. Now, I did find out actually a quote that answers your exact question. So when
What?
Joe talked about the initials, she said, quote, "It was the publisher's idea. They could have called me Enden Snoggengrass. I just wanted it published."
Okay, that makes sense.
There you go. So yes, I found her answer, and I'm like, that makes sense to me. I'd probably
That
do the same
totally
thing.
makes sense.
Right?
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
I love it. So in 1997, this was the year that everything changed. So, like Phoebe said, it was the year that the first Harry Potter book came out through Bloomsbury. Jo was taking the advice and she was keeping her day job as a teacher while she worked on book 2. That's when the book went into auction for the American publishers to buy the rights. Scholastic won the rights with a bid of $105,000, which is an incredible sum of money for a first-time author of a children's book. And with that money, Jo became a full-time author. Yeah.
Yay.
So her first novel was published in the United States under a different title, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, in 1998. 6 more books followed in the Harry Potter series, each achieving record-breaking success. And JK comments that this is ironic to her that she was putting herself in the frame of mind to write about Harry and how he would feel to suddenly become famous. Then after she put herself in Harry's shoes, and in her mind, her life became very similar to Harry's. So with the widespread success of the books, she too was suddenly famous. And reporters not only came to her home, but also to her father's home as well. And her private life did become far less private.
Yep.
Yeah, it all changed in 1997. Quickly.
It did.
And
Quickly.
on a dime. Yes.
Yeah. She said in her biography that there was news reports that she wasn't talking to her father or something. And she was
Right.
like, I just, like, and they knocked on his door, right? And she had called him an hour before that, and they were all
Right.
confused, like, what's happening? What's happening right
Uh-huh.
now? It's like,
Exactly.
I think it's really cool that we get to, like, help continue her corrections to her own story.
Absolutely. Yes. Let's get
Because,
the
like,
truth out there of what she has said.
absolutely.
Because she's still with
Yeah,
us. I
because
love it.
she is. She is. And we're like, these things are like, no, we heard her say it. Like, in a biography, like, no, she said this, not this other. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just cool that we kind of can help a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love it.
So I was wondering, after all of her book success with all of the books, obviously they became movies.
Yes.
So I was wondering, like, how involved she was and all that stuff.
Yeah.
How she, with all the fans and stuff, they're always saying, oh, the books are better. You know, the books are better.
Right.
But that's an 8-movie series.
Yep.
And they always say the books are better, but they never say that didn't follow the book at all.
Right. They're not saying that the movies themselves are bad. It's just that there's more in the books. Yeah.
Right. So to do that, somebody's got to be, in the works, putting their hands into it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how involved she was. So I looked it up a little bit, and she was apparently very involved. And first she insists, so the first thing is she insisted that the cast be all actually British so that the film would stay true to the core of the books.
Bravo.
Which is pretty cool.
Yes,
yeah.
I love that.
So this was not the director's idea, although I did see an interview where he made it sound like it was his idea, which really made me a little irritated, but...
I can't remember. Was the first director Christopher Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. Okay.
Yeah, that happened. I'm like, really? Or my boyfriend was in the same room. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, what? What's happening? I'm like, he did this. This isn't right.
He just claimed responsibility,
he just
or not claimed credit. Yeah, he claimed credit for it.
Yeah. Credit. Like, no, that was JK's idea.
Exactly. It was insisted upon.
So there was a race for brands to tie their products into the film series, and Coca Cola won.
Gotcha.
So JK insisted that Coca Cola, since they won, donate $18 million to the American charity Reading is Fundamental, as well as several community charity programs, which is really cool.
I love that.
From the start, she was like, I want to donate to charities. I want to, actually change the world, not just...
Right. If you're going to brand the movie, let's also do a positive environment. Yeah, positive into our community. I love that.
Yeah, and the charity thing is something that's really consistent in her life. Like, she's always trying to make a positive influence on the world past making stories.
Right, absolutely.
Which is so cool. Like, just the Harry Potter series alone, by itself, has changed so many lives. But she's taking an extra step and an extra few steps to continue to impact the world, which is just, I don't know.
It's
That's
rare.
why I love her
It's
so much.
really rare,
yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah.
Yep, I do too.
Yeah. So it was also noted that JK talked to the cast on set. And since only 4 out of the 7 books were written by the time they finished the first movie, the cast did not know what would happen to their characters later down the road. But JK had it all planned out in her head, and she gave Alan Rickman, who was Snape, and Robbie Coltrane, who was Hagrid, and Daniel Radcliffe, who was Harry, all clues and tidbits about what would happen to their characters in the future so that they could understand their characters better.
I love that.
Now, she didn't give away everything, but she gave away just enough so that they knew where they were headed.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Which is so awesome.
Because those nuances really do help actors. To kind of know where it's going and to paint a bigger picture that they can kind of internalize. I think that's lovely.
Absolutely. I do too. It's so cool. So throughout this whole process, JK was right there with the movies, making sure that they kept true enough to the books in order for the plot lines not to get messed up, which is incredibly helpful because between so many different people changing the story in a movie, things can get really lost, especially over a 7-book period, if you weren't keeping an eye on it all. I mean, it's hard to keep plot lines straight in one movie.
Yeah.
They had to keep plot lines straight in 8 movies or 7 books.
And it wasn't the same director each time either, so you have different creative ideas. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And the nature of movie making is everybody who's involved has a creative input.
Mm-hmm.
So any little tiny detail can change the movie.
Yes.
But if you have an observer keeping an eye on everything can stay consistent.
Yeah.
So JK Rowling was that observer, which is awesome.
Perfect, as it should be.
Yeah. I thought this was a really wise move on the Warner Brothers to let her stay, and a wise move on her part on being a part of this process. JK reviewed all the scripts, as well as acting as a producer on the final 2-part installment, The Deathly Hallows. So she's always been right there.
I love that.
It's just awesome.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So now when you become a success, like Joe has,
Right.
unfortunately, you also become an unfair target. Our culture does this all too often with celebrities. We hear people who achieve their dreams, but then we get this sick sense of jealousy or animosity, and we want to see them taken off their pedestal. It's a way of making them less than us so we feel important again, and it's not right. And many times, it's unjustified. It's also
Totally.
to sell newspapers, generally sometimes too. But
Yeah.
in Joe's case, there was a big backlash in 1999 of the witchcraft part of the novels. So a group of Christians worried that the books would promote the occult, and they were so worried they worked to have them banned from libraries and classrooms. Now, questions were raised of whether or not the church leaders or the parents even read the books before deciding to ban them.
Oh my gosh.
Or were they going after this book because kids were actually reading and getting excited about reading?
So I'd like to interject real quick on this topic because I actually grew up in a Christian home, and I went to a Christian school in 1999, and on all these books are coming out.
Ah, yes.
I was at a Christian school.
Right.
Right? So part of why I didn't read them at the appropriate age was I heard first about, like, my first hearing of Harry Potter was, oh no, it's witchcraft. We can't read that.
Ah, gotcha.
Like, not necessarily from my parents, but like it was always these rumors around school, or my grandparents even questioned it for a while, even though their opinions now are changed.
It was like in the woodwork sort of thing. It was around.
It was. Yeah. It was like almost this unspoken rule: you don't talk about Harry Potter because it's could be witchcraft thing. And I was like, oh no, like I'm the kind of person who wants to not ever be in trouble, so I wasn't even curious. I was like, okay, whatever, it'll be over there.
Right, exactly. Okay.
And
that's
then,
something I don't have to do.
And my mom writes fantasy stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So obviously it wasn't my parents or anything, but like later down the road I was like, oh, well, it's perfectly fine. But I was just like, it's very fascinating. It was very fascinating to me hearing her talk about that.
Right.
Because it never occurred to me how much it would bother her.
Right.
But it affected me a lot. It was like, it's probably the main reason why I didn't read them at first.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact that it bothered her so much, I mean, it was just fascinating. I mean, it's justified that it would bother her, but it's just interesting that I never thought about it that way.
Oh, you were right in the middle of it to a certain extent.
I was.
Look at that. I did like this. Judy Blume actually kind of summed up this whole time in a New York Times piece. She said, but in Minnesota, Michigan, New York, California, and South Carolina, parents who feel the books promote an interest in the occult have called for removal from the classrooms and libraries. I knew this was coming. The only surprise is that it took so long. If children are excited about a book, it must be suspect. That is your glorious Judy Blume surmising. So my story on it too, because I remember when it was the height of this whole thing too. The part that sticks out for me is when it was Christmas time. So it was Christmas, and the books were out, a couple of books were out, and the first movie was hitting. And so we had a Warner Brothers store, and the Warner Brothers store had tons of awesome Harry Potter stuff. And I really wanted to get Harry Potter stuff for my younger cousins, But I had to stop and think, would my aunts and uncles, are they part of the, witchcraft is terrible, like,
Right,
don't read these
yeah.
books? So I didn't know. Come to find out, they were totally fine with it. And they love their Christmas
Yay.
gifts. But I did kind of like, oh no, wait a minute. I should be mindful of this and, people's beliefs. And it did kind of start to feel like there was another witch hunt happening, basically.
Yeah, it did. No, yeah, it totally did.
It got a little,
like, oh,
a little Salem.
do
Yeah.
you read Harry Potter? Like, oh, Whisper, hey, do you read Harry Potter?
Right.
Yeah, I read Harry Potter. Oh no, you're going to hell. What? What is wrong? What's happening?
This is a thing? Wait a second.
What? How is this a thing?
Right.
Like, you read Lord of the Rings, right? Like, come on.
It's fantasy as well. It's also got wizards in it.
It does. It's like, isn't this the same? Well, not the same thing, but isn't it like the same concept?
Right.
Like,
It's a
really?
short jump away. It just doesn't have a major marketing tie-in happening at that current moment.
Yeah.
Fast forward to when the movies were released. Oh, then they didn't.
Right.
But yes, the other thing that worried me too, especially with the second Salem witch trials that were happening, is that I had friends, and I still have friends that are actually Wiccan, and so it actually really kind of worried me a little bit. Of, you're going after fictional characters, you're not going to go after real people, are you? So
yeah, you're not gonna go after my friends, are you? Like, come on.
So, but
feel that.
what they knew and what I knew as soon as we read the books, that like any good book about wizards and witches, it's all made up. It's all spells and twisted folklore to paint a picture. It is not heavily based in the occult, even in Wiccan at all. So it's one of those things. Yeah, it is not a book that is designed to have you join the occult. So Jo even said herself, she doesn't believe in witchcraft. There are so many articles out there that are also from Christian websites that are positive about Potter. So yeah, it was a thing in the last bit of 1999 that happened, and it was weird.
Right. It was weird. It was totally weird. I mean, now I have, like, everybody I know literally reads Harry Potter, and nobody is like, oh, you read Harry Potter? Oh, no, that's bad. Like, nobody does that
did
anymore,
not stick
which is great.
whatsoever.
It did not stick. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But it was weird when it did.
It really was. So you also dug into her other books that she has done. Yes, her adult books.
So JK Rowling actually wrote other novels other than Harry Potter, which not tons of people know.
I had no idea.
But more, I didn't know. And she even actually used a pseudonym, Robert Galbraith.
Ah.
And she published her first novel for adults, which was called The Casual Vacancy. And it's actually now been translated into 44 different languages, and it was adapted for TV by BBC in 2015.
Awesome.
JK Rowling wrote a handful of books under Robert Galbraith. Not everybody knew that Robert Galbraith was JK Rowling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Galbraith was actually described as a former plainclothes Royal Military Police investigator who had left in 2003 to work in the civilian security industry. And JK said that she enjoyed working on a pseudonym. And she even made a Robert Galbraith website.
Nice.
And JK explained that she took the name from one of her personal heroes, Robert Kennedy. And then the last name was her childhood fantasy name that she had invented for herself, which was Ella Galbraith.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
I thought that was a really cool little story. Yeah. Eventually, the general public knew Robert Galbraith was JK Rowling.
Right.
But, I mean, I think it'd be fun to write with a pseudonym. That'd be
absolutely
awesome.
You want to see if people can see your work separate from something else you did.
Totally.
Yeah.
So in 2016, J.K. Rowling wrote her first screenplay for the film Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which was a further extension of the Wizard World, and it was actually a prequel to the Harry Potter series.
Yes.
It featured Newt Scamander. This movie actually was the start of a 5-film series, and later this screenplay got published as a book itself, which I actually have and kind of geeked out about.
Nice.
Because the book is a screenplay. It's not a novel. So it's I liked Fantastic Beasts, so I thought it
See.
was pretty
And
awesome.
it was speaking your
Yeah.
language of screenplay.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I love it.
It's like, this is so cool.
You love geeking out about published screenplays. I love geeking out about commencement speeches. To
Yep.
me, they are a perfect opportunity for advice and encouragement and reflection, and even a way to kind of get to know a person, like their real success and failures of the speaker. You came to visit me, and what was the one I recommended for you? Neil Gaiman's commencement speech.
Yep.
Yep, I'm just
Yep.
saying. There's a handful of them, and as soon as I be like, I can give you advice, but you know what? This commencement speech is much better.
Right.
So Joe gave a great one in 2008 to the graduating class of Harvard, and it's another one I highly recommend checking it out on YouTube because she's funny. She really is. She starts out by talking about how nervous she is, but how that nervousness caused her to lose weight, and so thank you.
That's awesome.
The other part she talked about was that she couldn't remember anything from her commencement speaker when she graduated, so she didn't need to worry too much about imparting wisdom, because if she couldn't remember it, then odds are the students that day wouldn't remember what she said either.
Oh my gosh.
I thought it was adorable. But she did impart
Yeah.
wisdom. She talked about two things, the benefits of failure and the crucial importance of imagination. And the key thing that I really kind of took from the benefits of failure was that failure strips away what is not important. Failure shines a light on what you really need in life, and it shows you who you really are. And that's what she talked about. In Joe's hard times in poverty, she said, quote, "Rock bottom became a solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." And I thought that was beautiful.
That's a great quote.
Isn't that nice? Yes. This commencement speech also got turned into an illustrated book as well. So that
Oh,
is
wow.
out there. Yes.
That is so cool.
I know. Isn't that neat? Yes.
I want a book.
Yes, totally. So the second part, she talks about the importance of imagination. She talked about it in the broader sense, more than just creating a fictional world for page turners and popcorn munchers. She said, quote, "Imagination is the power to emphasize with humans whose experience we've never shared." And I loved that.
Totally.
She talks about her work with Amnesty International and the nightmares that it gave her, but also the hope that it gave her. And it's an amazing story. She also talks about magic, and she said, quote, "We don't need magic. We have the power to imagine better." And oh my goodness, I want that like embroidered on everything.
Yeah.
She encouraged not only the graduating class of Harvard to identify with the powerful and the powerless, but she gave that message to all of us. So it's a great speech. I highly recommended checking out the Harvard commencement speech by JK Rowling. I wanted to share a little bit because I think it actually kind of relates to this next bit, which is her charities. Kind of gives you a foundation of why she does what she does. So you were digging into
Absolutely.
charities.
So, Kate, you had asked in our minicast about JK's billionaire status.
Yes.
And if she lost it due to charitable giving.
I so want to know this.
Well, I found a Huffington Post article that the title reads, "Forbes billionaire list JK Rowling drops from billionaire to millionaire due to charitable giving."
Ah,
Right?
yes.
So, new information about JK's estimated 160 million in charitable giving,
Wow.
combined with Britain's high tax rates, bumped the Harry Potter scribe from our list this year. That is what Forbes said.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So, she's actually noted in the Forbes billionaire drop-offs list officially.
Wow.
So there's multiple different things. It's crazy.
Huh.
So in the article, it gives us this quote by her. It says that you have a moral responsibility when you've been given far more than what you need to do wise things with it and give intelligently.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Yeah. I really hoped that was true.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I thought that was. I did too. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like that quote just enhances everything else that we've learned about her today.
Absolutely. Yep. And you know what? I can also see that that same sort of sentiment in the Gates family too. Bill Gates and Melinda
Totally.
Gates.
Oh my
which
gosh, yes,
made me
totally.
appreciate a little bit more than what they do, even when my
Yeah.
windows don't always work.
Right. Exactly. Same.
Hmm.
Same Z's.
Character. It matters. It really does.
It does. It really does. So I actually pulled some information from her official biography and everything she's donating to. So I thought that they explained it really well, so I wanted to tell you about it.
Yeah.
So it says that JK Rowling supports a number of causes and organizations, mainly through her charitable trust, Volent. She is also the founder and president of the international children's charity called Lumos. And as a postgraduate, J.K. Rowling worked at the London office of Amnesty International, doing research into human rights abuses in the French-speaking countries of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Rowling was a patron of the Multiple Sclerosis Society in Scotland for 9 years. I deduct that that's an important thing to her because of her mom passing from MS.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She still helps with this directly through the Anne Rowling Regenerative Neurology Clinic.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so she's still involved in that, if she wasn't busy enough.
Yeah.
So she's also a patron of the Maggie Centers for Cancer Care for several years. So Maggie Centers are a network of drop-in centers across the United Kingdom and Hong Kong, and they aim to help anyone who's been affected by cancer in numerous and practical ways, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And she also helps Doctors Without Borders, and she performed a fundraising event with authors Stephen King and John Irving in New York in 2006. And then in 2011, she contributed to a book in aid of the charity. The book was called Dear Me, More Letters to My 16-Year-Old Self.
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah. So she was also involved in the Volent Charitable Trust, and it was set up by her in 2000 as a grant-making trust to support Scottish charities, groups, and projects, both national and community-based, which this helps alleviate social deprivation, particularly concerned with women, children, and young people at risk, which is
awesome.
So cool. And again, I took this from her website, so if you feel like you've heard this before, it's because you might have. I was like,
Exactly.
they sum it up really well.
Yeah. Oh, that is a lot, but you can see that all those things really matter to her.
Oh my gosh,
so that's awesome.
Yeah. They're all such a personal connection. She's not involved in one charity just for the heck of it. Like,
right.
Oh, I guess this one's okay. Like, no, everything's
It's not
very
this
personal.
Would look good on my resume. This is important to me.
Yeah. This is a personal connection. This matters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She's written books as a means for supports for charity comic relief, and this helps people out in poverty. And then she's also the president of the charity Gingerbread, which helps single parents. To say that she does a lot is kind of an understatement. This is all like she's very
amazing.
Involved in helping make the world better, which is just so cool.
I love that. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, so that brings us to her legacy.
Right.
And which we always talk about on the show.
Right.
And this one's a little bit difficult because she's still building it.
Right. Totally.
Yep. But my goodness, what an amazing legacy it is so far. Really.
It really is.
I was thinking about, just getting kids to be excited about reading. That's a legacy. That's a gift. Putting out and creating a world where the core of this world is about friendship. And it's kind of encircled by myth and folklore. It's one of those books that feels familiar, but new at the same time.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of magical, if you don't mind the pun. But also, we've got her charity work.
Right.
And she is a continued voice for those who feel voiceless. Right. It's an amazing legacy that she's building that we can still learn from her, like right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I think that she empowers thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
So if you check out her like social media and Twitter pages and all that, she's always vocalizing her opinions and like just putting herself out there still. And I think that with so many books and with so many things for kids and showing how Harry Potter's grown and showing how her characters have grown, she's enabling other kids to grow like with her characters and with her, and
Yeah.
empowering adults to let their children grow. I think that's very interesting, and it's going to be interesting to watch her legacy grow more, because
Right.
I mean, it would be interesting to ask her, what legacy are you trying to leave behind? It'd be
Right.
interesting for her to answer her own question.
It would be. And it's a very hard question to really kind of think, because it's harder to look forward than it is to look back.
Right.
So,
It
I
is.
mean, even for us, we're just kind of looking back of this is what we know so far.
Right.
Being in the forest of your life
Right.
and being able to know the forest from the trees. Yeah, it would be
Right.
amazing. I
Yeah.
would love to know what she would say. Dun, dun,
Me
dun.
too.
So when it comes to what we have learned, and what
Right.
I learned, I really learned how funny Jo is.
Oh, yeah.
I really dig her wit, and I love how she finds the funny in anxiety and social pressures. And I know a lot of that is just coping mechanisms, but I find her very funny, and I can really relate to
I love
when
it.
she pokes at jokes and when she does pranks on social media. I really dig those. I also learned that good things do happen to good people, but others are always going to try to belittle that, and they're going to try to make themselves feel better by cutting somebody else down. And what I really learned, what the big takeaway that I have from spending this week with her, is the power of imagination. And
Totally.
how imagination is a tool for empathy. I think I already knew that. I mean, I talk about movies a lot, and we talk about on this show about the powerfulness of empathy, but putting it together, you know what I mean? Like we do, we find
Right.
information, and we're doing that to tap into empathy, because when we empathize with somebody, we learn from them, and we grow and we learn, and we also
Absolutely.
get new roadmaps, and we deal with pitfalls better. So I value imagination, but after learning more about Jo, I think I've learned to value imagination even more, is what
Absolutely.
my takeaway.
That's awesome. So, kind of in line with that, I always thought when I think about the brains behind a fantasy world, I always think, okay, there's somebody else collaborating with them, or there's something inspiring them that they're basing this off of, or,
Right.
or there's a second mind in the works, or something like that. Um,
Some kind of
I know my,
shortcut almost. Help,
yeah,
assistance. Yeah.
right, exactly. And I know that my mom has a certain process when she wrote her books, and I have a certain process when I write, and I have a really hard time just imagining worlds. Like,
Mhm.
I can't, I don't know, I have a harder time just coming up with random stuff on my own. I have to collaborate, I'm really good at collaboration. I'm really good at, making stories work, or, something of that nature. But
Right.
I learned from Jo that if you just believe in yourself, you can actually come up with your own world by yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Like, that's incredible. That is very empowering to
It's
know.
in your power. Yeah, it's in your imagination if
Right,
you unlock it and trust in it. Yeah.
right. Like, that is so empowering to know, because she sat in a cafe and she just wrote. And it was like, oh my gosh, I could do that.
Mhm.
Not that I'm not saying, oh, I could be the next JK Rowling. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is,
Right, right.
like,
Yeah. But aim for it.
yeah, I'm allowed to believe in
Mhm.
myself. I guess that's what she taught me. And I learned that I don't hate Harry Potter as much as I thought I did.
Yay! Look at you.
I know.
Awesome.
I know. I gotta go watch the movies now.
A new convert. I think JK gets a new toaster every time somebody. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of toasters. No, so it's funny. At the end of the day, it was J.K. Rowling herself that convinced me to give Harry Potter a
Right?
chance. Like, that's just kind
Awesome.
of cool.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's not marketing, it's character.
It is, yeah.
It's her character. You
Right.
want to invest in her art and her imagination and the world that she kind of, created. It's like, you know what? This is worth some time.
Yeah, totally. Totally. She
I
herself
love
completely
it.
changed my mind. Yep.
Yep. Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And just a quick, like, as part of like final thoughts, I know I mentioned in the mini cast, I was curious if she ever got, married again.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's really not a big deal. It does not change my life knowing that fact whatsoever.
Right.
However, because she gets that moniker of the single mom, the penniless single mom sort of thing,
Right.
it is important to put out there she is happily married again, and she does have 2 more children. So
Yay!
I think that's awesome, and
Yeah.
I hope she's really happy because she deserves it.
Yeah, we get to end our episode with this happy ending. Like, we get to have a happy ending for her, which is
Yes,
so cool. And it's not
exactly.
an ending.
It's not an ending. It's just what we know so far.
Yep.
Well, that wraps it up for us. We leave you with this quote from JK. Whether you come back by page or by the big screen, Hogwarts will always be there to welcome you home. For more information about this week's Gal or to check out our previous episodes, visit galsguide.org. To support the show, visit the Gals Guide Patreon page. We've got great perks like behind the scenes, early access, and private live streams. Thank you so much for subscribing to Your Gal Friday.